How heavy should you be lifting if your goal is to build muscle? Should you be doing high reps with light weights, or would you be better off doing low reps with heavier weights? Well, the short answer is that you want to pick a weight that you can do between 5 to 30 reps with, while also making sure that you go close to muscular failure. However, as always, the real answer is a bit more nuanced than that. And so in this video, we're going to be looking at some different considerations that you want to take into account when selecting your training loads if your goal is to build muscle, and how you can implement this information in a practical way in your own training. So I can remember when I started lifting weights about 15 years ago, the general consensus was that if you wanted to build muscle, you had to lift in the 6 to 12 rep range. Anything lower than that would build strength but not size, and anything higher than 12 repetitions was basically just strength endurance. However, this has since become a myth, as research clearly shows that you can build muscle effectively over a variety of rep ranges, and as long as the set lasts long enough and you can do at least 5 to 6 repetitions with it, and the weight you're using isn't too light, meaning that you can't do more than 30 repetitions with it, then each set will provide a similar stimulus for muscle growth as long as it's taken close enough to failure. That being said, there are a few practical things that you want to consider. First, what exercise you're doing is definitely going to influence the rep range that you want to choose. For instance, on compound exercises, especially on barbell compound exercises, doing more than 12 reps per set will mostly fatigue your cardiovascular system before it fatigues the muscles that you're trying to target. And if you're doing an exercise where you really need to focus on stabilizing yourself, so for instance an RDL or a bent over barbell row, then oftentimes your stabilizing muscles will fatigue before the actual muscles that you're trying to target will fatigue. So in those exercises, I think it's a good idea to stick mostly to 5 to 12 repetitions. On isolation exercises, however, like curls or side raises, doing very heavy weights and very low reps can oftentimes feel pretty uncomfortable on your joints, so I generally prefer staying above 10 reps on these movements. This isn't to say that you have to do it this way or that you have to do all your isolation work above 10 reps, but for most people it will probably just feel a little bit more comfortable on their joints. And that brings me to point number 2 that you want to consider when choosing your rep ranges, and that is your injury history. So if you're someone who has nagging pains, or maybe you're coming off an injury, then training with low loads and higher reps is a great way to put less stress on your joints. So if you're someone who has nagging joint pain, or maybe you're a coach and you work with someone who has osteoarthritis, then you can just do the majority of your sets in the 20 to 30 rep range and still get the same muscle building effect while also putting a lot less force on your joints. And in terms of injury risk, research shows that both low reps and high reps are extremely safe. So if you compare sports like bodybuilding and powerlifting to something like a team sport, then the injury risk is a lot lower. And as long as you're able to do the movement correctly and with proper form, then you can basically choose the rep range that you feel is best suited for that given exercise. And if you've been enjoying this video so far, then make sure you give this a thumbs up and comment down below what rep range you generally prefer training in. So that brings me to another factor that is often overlooked, but I think is super important, and that is the personal enjoyment that you get out of your training. So something might be better on paper than something else, but if you don't enjoy it, then chances are you're not going to stick to it consistently, and over the long run that's not going to matter. So there was a study in 2019 on resistance trained men that found that training in the 25 to 30 rep range induced a higher degree of effort, discomfort and displeasure than training in a more moderate rep range of 8 to 12 reps. And that is something that I can really agree with. I personally hate doing reps that are higher than 20. Like the first couple of reps you feel like you're not really doing anything, and then towards the end it's just miserable, your muscles start burning and it's just a horrible feeling. And because I know that training between 5 to 20 reps brings me the same amount of effect as training with 20 reps or higher, I just stick to doing 5 to 20 reps for basically all of my training. If you enjoy training with higher repetitions and lower weights, then by all means go for it. I'm not going to tell you not to, but just make sure that you're actually training as hard as you think you are. Because research does also show that if you are doing very high rep sets, then most people aren't really accurate at gauging how close to failure they are. And that is just because it's such a miserable experience that people think they're very close to failure, but in reality they probably would have had a couple of more reps left. So with all this information, how should you apply this to your training? I would say you want to do the vast majority of your training in the 5 to 15 rep range. That's just going to be the most efficient and also the most enjoyable for most people. And then do your barbell compound exercises in the 5 to 12 rep range, with your dumbbell work, your machine exercises and your isolation exercises being done in the 8 to 15 rep range. And if you want to maximize muscle growth, so for instance if you're a competitive bodybuilder, then it's probably a good idea to also mix in some higher rep training, because different rep ranges might target different muscle fiber types a little bit more, a little bit less. If you're just someone who trains to look good, then you can basically choose whatever rep range you want to train in from the 5 to 30 rep range. but it's probably a good idea to have some kind of variety just to make your training a little bit less boring. And with all your training, you want to make sure that you're using correct technique, that you're training over a full range of motion and pushing close enough to failure to make sure that you're actually getting the most out of each set. And then remember that for putting on muscle mass, you also have to consider factors outside of your training, like your calorie consumption or your protein intake. So if you want to learn more about that, just click the screen right here and watch my video on how to lean bulk successfully. So that's it for this one, guys. I hope this was helpful and you're able to apply some of the information into your own training. Make sure that you like this video, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next video.